of Burr buzzed with anticipation over the coming festivities. Wyoming Territory had suffered a hard winter, and the advent of spring lightened everyone's heart, even though the weather was still seasonably cool. The spring social was a way to celebrate. Sarah stood in her room, listening to the enthusiastic shouts that drifted to her. Since the Calhoun house stood back-to-back with the newspaper office, sound carried easily from Main Street. Excitement about that night's social event crackled around Burr like a blanket of lightning. Sarah spread her brown poplin dress on the bed. She, too, was looking forward to the event. She intended to corner Jack Donovan and discover what secret lurked in his shady past. Her intuition told her it was something big, a story that would elevate the Burr Chronicle from a tiny weekly newspaper to one that would circulate across the territory. For a moment, she reveled in her daydream. Her task promised to be difficult, since the man was quite simply impossible. Every time she had tried to get him to talk to her, he did something outrageous to prick her temper. There was the time she'd followed him to the creek and he'd pulled her in, and the time in the barn when he'd tossed a fork full of hay at her, and the barber shop when he'd smeared the shaving cream all over her. Other occasions over the past 5 months made her burn just to think about them. Obtaining answers would require both fortitude and persistence, and she had to keep him from goading her. Gladly, she accepted the challenge. A soft knock sounded at her door. "Come in." The door swung open and her mother peeked in. "Oh good, you're not dressed yet." With a flourish, June Calhoun strode through the doorway. "Look at this. Isn't it lovely?" Sarah stared as her mother held up a beautiful sky-blue satin gown. Ecru lace edged a squared neckline that dipped lower than any dress Sarah owned. The same lace rimmed the hem and sleeves, occasionally graced by tiny blue bows. It was a fabulous creation, designed for evening wear. "That's Susanna's gown," she murmured in recognition. "It'll never fit." Her mother beamed. "I altered it for you." She held it up against Sarah. "You'll look stunning." Her mother's blue eyes sparkled with a pride Sarah hesitated to extinguish. After the death of her husband, June Calhoun had started taking in sewing to make ends meet. In the past 3 years, she had gone from simple mending and tailoring to designing many of the gowns worn by the women of Burr. The satisfaction her work brought had helped her deal with the grief of losing her husband. Sarah fingered a bit of lace wistfully. "You did a fine job, Mama. I wanted you to have something to wear besides that plain poplin of yours." Sarah glanced from the dress on the bed to the one in her mother's arms. "I think I should wear the poplin," she said gently. "It's not as conspicuous. After all, I'm going for the sake of the paper." "Nonsense." Her mother spread Susanna's dress on the bed beside the sturdy poplin. Tucking back a graying strand of dark blonde hair, she considered the two garments. Even Sarah had to admit that the fancy gown stood out like a peacock next to a broody hen. "There's no reason you shouldn't have hopes and dreams just like every other young lady your age," her mother said. Old memories rose to taunt Sarah, reminding her of all she could not have. "There's a very good reason," she replied with a hint of bitterness. "Luke Petrie, remember?" "Him?" A wave of June's hand dismissed Sarah's comment. "That was years ago." "People in this town have long memories. If I arrive at the dance all decked out in silk and lace, everyone will be talking for weeks." Sarah took her mother's hand. "Mama, I'm not Susanna. She could have carried this off." "She certainly could. Your sister never let idle tongues bother her." Smiling, June pulled her hand from Sarah's and took up the brown poplin. "I'll just put this away." "Mama!" Sarah's protest fell on deaf ears as her mother marched out of the room in possession of her best dress. Despite her mother's determination to find her a husband, Sarah had long ago accepted that no man would have her. Not after the indiscretion 3 years before, which had caused her father's death. Since then, she had become the most respectable of citizens, dressing in somber colors, never showing a hint of bosom or a flash of ankle. In memory of